My name is Liana Cruz. I'm 34 and I don't sleep much these days. I've rehearsed this in my head 1,000 times, what I'd say, how I'd say it. Not to justify, not to make myself look better, but just to make it make sense. Maybe even to myself. I cheated on the man I loved. I got pregnant. Then I asked him to help cover the $40,000 in medical costs because I thought the baby was his. And the first thing he said was, I'll wait for the DNA test. Not I love you, not we'll figure this out. Just that. But the truth is, I knew something had broken long before I ever opened my legs to someone else. It wasn't always like this. Julian and I met when I was 26. I was living in this tiny walk-up in Jersey City, working nights as a waitress and dreaming of becoming a therapist. He walked into the diner one rainy night with a group of friends. He didn't even order food, just a coffee black. But he stayed for hours, making me laugh between orders, scribbling little doodles on napkins for me to keep. We were fire and velvet. He was the kind of man who'd trace circles on my back until I fell asleep. We couldn't keep our hands off each other for the first 3 years, grocery store aisles, lazy Sunday mornings, quick kisses that turned into long nights. He used to call me his compass, said I gave direction to the mess in his life. But even a compass gets tired of spinning when it's ignored. After 6 years together, things didn't fall apart overnight. That would have been easier. They eroded. Quietly. A million little silences. At first, it was small things, him brushing off my hand when I reached for his at the movies. Kissing me out of habit, not heat. Cuddling that felt more like me trying to keep warm next to a sleeping body that didn't know I was there. I remember one night, a few months before it all unraveled. I had just gotten out of the shower. I was in one of his old shirts, damp hair dripping down my back. I climbed into bed beside him and he didn't even look up from his phone. I touched his thigh, leaned in to kiss his neck, the way I used to, and he'd always respond, but he just shifted, said he was tired, and turned off the lamp. I stared at the ceiling for an hour after that. My heart didn't even break, it just dulled. Like something sacred had gone missing and I couldn't tell if I lost it or if he gave it away. It's strange. The body always knows first. Before the mind catches up. Before the soul admits it's lonely. The exact moment I realized things had changed? It was on a Tuesday. Julian came home late. I was cooking. He kissed my cheek, barely touched me, and said, "Smells good." I laughed and said, "It's your favorite," hoping he'd meet my eyes. He didn't. He walked past me, and for the first time I realized I had become a piece of furniture in our life. Familiar. Useful. Unnoticed. That's when I knew. We weren't in love anymore. At least, not in the way we used to be. And not in the way I needed. Julian is a paramedic. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16. He's seen people take their last breath on the side of the road and still come home to me with blood on his sleeves and tired eyes. That used to make me proud. I told my friends he saves lives. But somewhere along the way I stopped feeling like one of them. He shows love the way you learn to in trauma, fast, physical, and without words. A hand on my lower back when I pass him in the kitchen. A kiss on the neck before work. Sometimes sex in the morning that feels more like routine than connection. I, on the other hand, need softness. Words. Silence that holds me instead of swallows me. I need to be looked at, really looked at. Not just touched. One night, he came home earlier than usual. I was curled on the couch in sweatpants, watching something I didn't care about just to fill the room with sound. He dropped his gear bag with a heavy thud, came over behind me, and pressed his lips to my temple. "Missed you," he whispered into my hair. It was automatic, my body leaned into his. But my heart didn't move. "Did you?" I asked. He blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. "Of course. Why would you say that?" I didn't know how to explain that I wasn't asking about physical presence. I was asking if he missed seeing me. The part of me that used to make him laugh in the middle of traffic or cry in the middle of movies. "You've just seemed distracted," I said cautiously. He sat beside me, wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and pulled me into him like that would fix it. And maybe a year ago it would have. "You're overthinking again, Liana," he said gently, fingers stroking my arm. That stung. Not because he was wrong, but because he made it sound like my loneliness was a glitch in my thinking, not a symptom of something real. We sat like that for a while, me stiff against his chest, his hand moving over my skin in a rhythm that used to be comforting. But now it just felt like he was trying to pacify me, like a sedative. Later that week, I left dinner on the stove, his favorite again, always trying, and waited for him to come home. He was 3 hours late. No text, no call. When he finally walked through the door, I was already in bed, facing the wall. He slipped in behind me, spooned his body around mine, and whispered, Sorry. Rough shift. I didn't move. He kissed my shoulder. Then again. A slow line up to my neck. I could feel what he wanted, his hands traveling places they hadn't touched in weeks. But I wasn't there. I wasn't even in my body anymore. Julian. Stop. I whispered. He froze. Why? I don't feel close to you, I said. My voice cracked. I feel disconnected. He rolled away slowly, sighed. You're always saying that. Always needing something I don't know how to give. I stared at the ceiling, blinking back the ache behind my eyes. I'm not asking for more. I'm asking for you. But he didn't answer. Just turned away, his breath evening out until I wasn't sure if he was asleep or just pretending to be. In that space between us, I felt it, the distance that no touch could bridge. Julian made pancakes the next morning. He wasn't a cook, not even close. But he'd try every now and then, mostly when he felt guilty. He flipped them too early, burned one side, forgot the syrup. Still, he brought the plate to me like it was a peace offering. I put chocolate chips in them this time, he said, smiling like he wanted me to smile too. I looked up from my phone, nodded politely. Thanks. He leaned in and kissed the top of my head. The kind of kiss that's supposed to melt something in you. It used to. Now I just felt a numb. I ate one pancake to be polite. Chewed slowly while he stood behind me, rubbing my shoulders. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't even sexy. It was habit. He always did this, reached for me, touched me, even when I wasn't reaching back. You're so tense, he said, squeezing a little harder. I'm fine. He kissed the back of my neck. I froze. I didn't mean to, my body just tensed without permission. He noticed. I could feel his hands hesitate. Did I do something wrong? No, I stood quickly, grabbed my plate and walked it to the sink. I just didn't sleep well. That was half true. I hadn't slept well in weeks. But not because of him. Because of us. That night we watched a movie on the couch, or pretended to. I kept checking my email, rereading client notes. I wasn't really paying attention. I just didn't want to be touched. He shifted closer, placed a hand on my thigh. I didn't look at him, but I could feel the familiar pattern, his fingers slowly climbing up, pausing just above my knee, waiting. I forced a smile. I'm not in the mood, Jules. He laughed softly. Just cuddling, babe. But it never stopped at cuddling. Not anymore. I let him pull me into his arms, my head resting on his chest. His heartbeat was steady, so steady it made me feel like the only one who noticed how wrong everything was. 10 minutes later, his hand slipped under my shirt. I didn't flinch, not this time. I just detached, floated somewhere above myself. My body was here, his hands were here, but my heart was curled up in some corner of the room, watching and wishing I could go back to when this meant something. I pulled away gently. Julian, don't. He sat up, annoyed now. You've been not in the mood for 3 weeks. And I'm tryingly. I'm really trying. But every time I get close, you shut down. I looked at him, really looked. And for a second I saw the man who used to undress me like he was uncovering a secret. I wanted to want him. But my chest just felt tight. Like I was holding in a scream that no one would understand. You think touching me fixes everything, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. I'm showing you I love you. No, Julian. You're showing me you want me. That's not the same thing. He threw his hands up. So what? I'm supposed to stop wanting you because you're going through something? I'm not going through something, I snapped. I'm just tired of pretending we're okay. The silence after that was heavy. Neither of us moved. He stared at me like I'd betrayed him. And maybe I had. Maybe the real betrayal had started long before someone else touched me. I turned away, pulled my knees to my chest. And in the quiet, I thought to myself, it was supposed to be a date night. Julian made reservations at that new Italian place I'd mentioned once, offhandedly, 2 months ago. He remembered. That's the part that breaks me now. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in over a year. Something tight, something that used to make me feel desired. My reflection looked fine. But something behind my eyes looked hollow. At dinner, the conversation was fine. That kind of how is work, surface talk that feels like treading water just to avoid drowning. He was trying, I could see it, complimenting my hair, holding my hand across the table, cracking old jokes like we were still us. I forced laughs. Took sips of wine I didn't want. Tried to mirror what we used to be. And then he said it. So I was thinking maybe we booked that Puerto Rico trip in December. Just us. Get away for a while, yeah. And I lost it. I didn't mean to. But something about the ease in his voice, the planning, the pretending like a vacation could fix the miles between us, it shattered something I'd been taping together for months. I blinked hard, hoping it would pass. It didn't. My throat tightened. My chest burned. And before I could stop myself, the words spilled out. Julian, do you even see me anymore? He looked up from his ravioli, startled. What? Seriously? You keep trying to fix this with food and trips and touching me like it still means something. But do you actually see how far we've fallen? His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Where is this coming from? I laughed, sharp and bitter. Where it's coming from? Julian, I cry in the bathroom at least once a week so you won't hear me. That's where it's coming from. People were starting to glance over from nearby tables. He leaned in, whispering, Can we not do this here? I pushed my plate away, my appetite long gone. You think planning a getaway erases the fact that I feel invisible in our own house? I'm trying, Liana. No, you're trying to avoid. You're trying to cover it all with sex and gestures and God knows what else. But you never actually ask me how I am. His face was red now. Because every time I try, it turns into this. You push me away, then get mad that I'm not close enough. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Do you know I sometimes imagine what it'd be like to be loved by someone else? Not for sex, just for space, for peace. Do you know how guilty I feel about that? His jaw tightened. So what, you want someone else now? I didn't answer, because the truth was too messy to say out loud. I was already slipping emotionally. I had already crossed lines in my head. My body followed weeks later, and now I was sitting across from the man I used to dream about, and all I wanted was to go home and crawl into bed alone. We rode home in silence. I watched the city blur past the car window, trying to collect the pieces of myself that had scattered all over that restaurant floor. When we got inside, he went straight to the bedroom. Didn't wait, didn't ask. I stayed on the couch. And that night, I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the dark. What the hell is wrong with me? Why can't I just love him the way he wants? Why did I let myself fall so far away from us? Julian didn't slam doors. He didn't shout. That wasn't his way. Instead, he went quiet. And somehow, that was worse. After the restaurant, it was like we both silently agreed to stop pretending. We still shared the same space, brushing past each other in the kitchen, folding laundry side by side, falling asleep with a gulf of untouched sheets between us. But there were no more small touches. No morning kisses. No, how was your day? It felt like living with a ghost who knew exactly where all your soft spots were, and avoided every one of them. One night I walked into the living room and found him on the floor, knees pulled up, scrolling through old photos on his phone. His thumb paused on one from 3 years ago. Us in Big Sur, tangled in a picnic blanket, smiling so wide it hurt to look at. He didn't know I saw. I just stood in the hallway and watched the curve of his shoulders sag with something he wouldn't say out loud. I missed him then. Fiercely. But not the version I'd been trying to force myself to love again. I missed the man who used to write me notes and leave them in the fridge. The man who called me Leah in the morning when his voice was still sleepy and honest. I missed the way I used to feel when I was around him, like I mattered. Like I was home. But now everything between us felt guarded. Like we were both trying to protect what little dignity we had left. And beneath all of that, my own guilt growing heavier each day. I kept thinking about what I'd done, not just the physical cheating, but the emotional distance that came before it. The resentment I let fester. The things I never said because I didn't want to hurt him, but ended up hurting him anyway. I saw it on his face in the small moments, like when I accidentally brushed his hand while reaching for a coffee mug, and he pulled back too fast. Or when we sat in the car in silence and he opened his mouth to speak, then stopped himself. He was grieving, not loudly but deeply, and the worst part was I couldn't reach him. I didn't know how anymore. One afternoon, I caught him packing a small duffel bag in the hallway. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just staying at my brother's for a bit. Need to clear my head." I nodded. I didn't stop him. Couldn't. Because I understood. He needed space from the war zone we'd made of our love. But after he left, I sat on the edge of our bed and ran my hand over his pillow, still holding the shape of his head. and I cried. Not the kind of crying that begs for attention. The kind that's quiet and aching and full of questions with no answers. I thought about the pregnancy. About how complicated everything had become. About how I asked him to help with the birth costs like we were still partners, like the baby was unquestionably his when even I wasn't sure. About how he said nothing when I told him, just stared at the floor for so long I almost apologized out loud. He didn't fight. He didn't accuse. He just waited for the DNA test. That told me everything. And now, as I sat in our empty room, silence thick around me, one question pulsed in my chest. Do I still love him, or do I just miss who we used to be? And the scarier truth was, maybe I didn't know the difference anymore. But I had to choose. Stay and try to rebuild something that might already be gone. Or walk away and finally face the consequences of what I broke. I didn't know yet, but I was running out of time. He came back after 3 weeks. No announcement. No dramatic confrontation. Just the soft sound of his key in the door late one Sunday afternoon, like he never really left, like some part of him still belonged here. I was folding towels in the hallway when I heard him. My hands paused mid-fold, towel slumped over my forearm like a flag of surrender. We stood across from each other in the entryway, two familiar strangers surrounded by everything we built. The lamp we bought together. The rug we fought over. The tiny scuff on the wall from where I once threw a sock at him during a dumb play fight. Hey, he said. I swallowed. Hey. He looked tired. Pale. Like something inside him had thinned out. I wanted to ask if he'd been sleeping, if he was eating, if his brother still made those awful turkey sandwiches with too much mayo. But the words stayed stuck behind my ribs. He gestured toward the couch. Can we talk? We sat, not touching, not quite looking. The silence stretched until it started to creak. Then he said, quietly, I got the results. My stomach turned. And? He met my eyes. It's not mine. The world shifted just slightly. I felt it in the back of my teeth. Even though I knew, or at least suspected, hearing it out loud broke something final. I'm sorry, I whispered. He nodded, slow and tired. I know. There was no yelling. No slammed fists. Just the kind of ache that settles in after all the storms have passed, when there's only debris left to sweep up. I keep thinking, he said, that maybe if I just listened more. Or stopped pushing for sex when you needed space. Maybe if I had noticed sooner. Julian, stop, I cut in. This isn't on you. I was the one who shut down. I was the one who looked elsewhere. You tried. I couldn't find my way back. He looked away, his jaw tight. I wanted to be your home. I thought I was. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could catch it. You were. For a long time, you were. He reached out then, not in anger, not in passion, just gently. His fingers brushed mine, warm and trembling. I didn't pull away. We sat like that for a long time. Not lovers. Not enemies. Just two people mourning the version of us that had died quietly in the middle of so many silent nights. Eventually, he leaned forward and pressed a kiss to my forehead. Soft. Lingering. Not as a promise, but a goodbye. That night, he slept on the couch. I woke up around 3 a.m., crept down the hallway barefoot and stood over him for a few minutes. His chest rose and fell slowly. One hand hung off the edge of the cushion, fingers curled loosely like he used to when he held me in bed. I sat beside him, not saying anything. Just watching the man I had once imagined building a life with. And I realized we weren't rebuilding. We were parting with kindness. It wouldn't be a scorched earth ending. It would be soft. Slow. Me finding a new apartment. Him taking some of the bookshelves. Maybe a stray hoodie left behind. Maybe the occasional message months later, hope you're doing okay. There wouldn't be a happy ending. But there would be peace. Sometimes that's all that's left. And sometimes that's enough. You know, people always talk about love like it's this wild, blazing thing. Like a fire that roars through your life, consuming everything, your doubts, your loneliness, your broken parts. But they don't tell you that real love, the kind that sticks around for years, it's quieter than that. It's Tuesday night dinners and folding laundry and watching the same movie for the 5th time just to hear him laugh at the same part again. It's boring sometimes. But it's safe. And I think that's what scared me the most. I'm Amelia. I'm 33. And I ruined the safest thing I ever had. I've thought about this every day since Julian left. Not just the moment I cheated, though God, that part plays on a loop in my head some nights, but the months that came before. The slow unraveling. The way I let resentment grow in the spaces where conversation should have been. He wanted sex. I wanted to be seen. He thought touching me would fix us. I needed him to ask why I stopped laughing at his jokes. We were both starving, just in completely different ways. And instead of talking to him, I ran from him. Into the arms of someone who didn't love me, who didn't know me, who didn't carry 10 years of my life in his back pocket. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about vanishing from myself, from the weight of who I had become in that relationship. I thought if I could disappear into someone else for one night, I might remember who I used to be. But you don't find yourself in someone else's bed. You find yourself in the mirror the next morning, hating the person staring back at you. And when I told Julian I was pregnant, when I asked him for help with the costs, I saw in his eyes how much it broke him. Not just because I had betrayed him, but because, somewhere in him, he still hoped the child was his. That maybe it would mean we had a reason to try again. He waited for the DNA test like a man watching the final seconds of something he used to believe in. It wasn't his. And he didn't scream. He didn't call me names. He just sat there, so heartbreakingly still. I think the kind of quiet pain stays with you longer than rage ever could. Yeah? I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. The baby is due in a few weeks. And no, I haven't heard from the father. That doesn't surprise me. Julian and I spoke once, a month ago. Just a short message, I hope everything goes smoothly. I wrote back, thank you. I hope you're okay. That was it. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. I doubt he'll be at the hospital. And I don't blame him. I wouldn't be either. But I think about him every day. Not out of longing, not anymore, but out of gratitude. For the kind of love that teaches you what it means to really be seen, and the kind of heartbreak that shows you how dangerous it is to let yourself go unseen for too long. If I could go back, I wouldn't rewrite the story. That sounds strange, I know. But some lessons don't land until you lose everything you thought you couldn't live without. So if you're listening to this and you're in a relationship where you feel alone, or numb, or like your body is always on offer but your soul is always starving, please talk. Talk before you vanish. Talk before someone walks away quietly with nothing left to say. Because silence is the heaviest goodbye there is. Tab 1.